they're included in the video at all. Oh, okay, then feel free to. This is for the police, of course. So, I know it's ideally to make a talk without notes, but I have too much to say. You could be here at 3 o'clock, but I will tick off each one. So, first of all, I was born in Abersoch. A mistake on holiday. 4th generation of family visiting Abersoch on holiday. And born in 1948, so I'm 54. And have been for the last 23 years. People talk themselves into old age, don't they? There's no need for it. You can actually stay young if you intend to. So I was a baby of 5 children, hugely privileged to be part of a really very happy family. Laughter prevailed constantly, which we thought was normal, which was wonderful. I had a joyful childhood. One of the memories that sprang back into my mind very recently was the first memory of my 3rd birthday. And I was given a tin hen on wheels with a stick, red stick. And it flapped, you know, as you pushed it along, it flapped it. And it went, quack, quack, and I was thrilled to bits with this. And it was delivered in a cardboard box with straw inside at breakfast time. And they distracted me, took me out into the hall. And then they say, Paul, come back. So I came running back in. And they lifted the head. And there was a soft-boiled egg. Probably the most happy moment of my life. But then it was followed by great disappointment because it never laid another one. There we go. Up to the age of, from 3 to 6, I was sent off to Upton Hall Convent, where I had the experience of very fierce nuns. And they taught me to be alert to danger. Probably a good start in my life. My only experience of a co-educational school. So I was sent then later to Stonyhurst, a Jesuit boarding school, from the age of 6, believe it or not, for 10 years. And I was fortunate to be a rebel, as were all my friends. So we survived what could otherwise have been a tortuous experience. But I remember there was one priest, Father Clark, who was an absolutely wonderful, wonderful teacher. And he taught me worthiness and imagination, 2 fabulous starts to life at the age of 6 or 7. So I don't profess to be religious, but I feel very strongly that all religions have love at their core. Some may appear to have been manipulated for purposes of control, but I feel that love remains irrevocably at the core for those who choose to discern it in any religion. I was expelled at the age of 16 for smoking. If you were caught 3 times, you were out. So when they caught me for the 7th time, they said, there's the door. I was absolutely delighted. My father was very forgiving, thank heaven. And I remember he'd say, what do you intend to do with your life? I said, well, Pa, let me tell you that I'm not going to join the family firm because that's a gentleman's way out. I'm going to make my own way in life. And he said, oh, very well, good. He said, well, while you're thinking about what you're going to do, why don't you come in as an office junior and then you've got a few pounds in your pocket? I said, okay. So I joined and stayed for 30 years. I had it was an incredible experience. We were a timber importing company and lived in the Wirral and worked in Bootle, so I consider myself very much a 30-year scouse, and I enjoyed it enormously. After my office junior apprenticeship, I ended up on the docks as a tally clerk, and I used to come home literally aching with laughter because the humour of the dockers, the humour of the Liverpool workers was just out of this world, and that was my secondary education, for certainly was. We engaged in a great deal of unnecessary world travel. Of course, we had to go and see the shippers. And we never actually made any real money, but just kept ourselves afloat. I remember my fellow apprentice was a man called Neil Dixon, who I'm still very close to. And he was office junior when I joined. And he was showing me around the office and ended up taking me up to the stationery attic. And I was saying, there are the sale notes and those invoice forms, and there's a great big pile of kitchen towel rolls on one side. I'd never seen a kitchen towel roll before. So I said, what are those, Mr. Dixon? He said, oh, those are director's bog rolls. You see, they've got big bottoms. Unforgettable. We had, there was one time on the docks, I met not just incredible humour, but philosophy as well. And I'll never forget, there was a man called Alex in our team, and he was pear-shaped. And he had a dirty Macintosh, so only the top button could be done up because the rest of it couldn't fit. But everything one day had gone so wrong, it just couldn't, it lashed with rain, the wagon broke down, the crane went to the wrong quayside, and at 5 o'clock I tripped, fell, and my tally book went into the dock with the previous 2 weeks' measurements in it. Latterly we fudged all the measurements and nobody complained, so that was okay, but at the time I was in total despair. And I remember Alex came up to me, he put his arm around me, he came up with this one wonderful philosophical sentence which I've never forgotten and has served me well throughout my life. He said, "Well, Paul, well, I mean, F and L, I mean, nor me." Let's say that again. "Well, Paul, well, I mean, F and L, I mean, nor me." Wonderful. Sorted the whole day out. So from then on, I discovered, having left school, that there were only two. I was hopeless at sports at school, but then I discovered I was okay at driving and okay at clay shooting. They're the only two sports that I feel I can do well. And the rest you can keep, but everybody's very welcome to them. Amateur dramatics. Da-da-da. Actually joined the Nefyn players, and we had tremendous fun with various disasters and successes. Mostly it seemed to depend on the amount of drink that was taken, but then we won't go into that. I have to be honest that throughout my life I was been a very, very heavy drinker, until about probably 5 years ago, when my guardian angel or somebody else tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Is this the best idea you've ever had?" Because I was literally on 3 bottles of wine a night. And since then, I've suddenly, for God-given reason, just lost interest. And I'm so grateful for that. So now I might have a glass of wine with a meal, but probably not. And during the week I don't touch it, and the weekends I don't bother with it. My wife has 1 glass of wine a night and doesn't interest me at all. So I'm hugely grateful for whatever pointed me in that direction, because I probably wouldn't be speaking to you now if I'd carried on as I was before. And the same, of course, with smoking. There we are. So amateur dramatics, oh yes, and I sang once. I was never a particularly competent chorister, as somebody will verify, but I did have the privilege of being roped into a big choir in the Wirral, who were invited to join an even bigger choir to sing under Simon Rattle at the Liverpool Philharmonic in Porgy and Bess. And that was a marvellous, marvellous experience. So that was my amateur dramatics of singing. Holidays were always in Abersoch, and have been for 4 generations. Sailing and powerboating, incredible adventures, some of which should be hidden from history, but heaven on earth. I married my first wife, Vivian Robinson, in 1973, married for 20 years, very happily, and then at the end of 20 years we realised that we wanted to go our different ways. So I'm still very good friends with her, I'm glad to say. She has a new partner as well. So 2 children, Toby and Joanna, who I'm hugely privileged to have. And in brief, because people go on about their children, don't they? But in brief, Toby went on to become probably the most sought after food photographer in South Africa. Mm-hmm. He's completely booked up for the next 2 years, recipes and restaurant stuff. And he ends up doing probably about 5 or 6 trips a year, where he will go for 40 days or so around 5 5-star resorts, where he has to eat the 5-star food which he photographs. And as a result of which, he and his little family, his wife and my grandson, get invited to go and stay there free of charge. So little Alex, who was 8 on 2nd of March, thinks that 5-star hotels are a normal way of life. It's absolutely brilliant. Then my daughter, Joanna, who has left me standing in so many ways. When I was, back when she was 19, she's 49 now, when she was 19, she came up, I just got my helicopter instructor rating, and she came up, poked me in the chest and said, "Teach me to fly helicopters." I said, "Oh yes, well who's going to pay for it?" She said, "You are." Cut a very long story short, she now has over 4,000 hours of firefighting in helicopters in Australia. Oh, wow. And just left me standing. And I'm so proud of them both. I'm hugely privileged. And then I have one grandchild, Alex, who was 8 in March this year, and he was adopted at 3 months. by Toby and Anna in South Africa, and he's absolutely gorgeous and total sprite of life. When he was 5, my son Toby put a question to him. He said, "Alex, what does love feel like?" Instantaneous answer from this 5-year-old. "It feels like playing, Daddy." And I thought that was just perfect, out of the mouths of babes. Absolutely fabulous. During the course of my working for the timber company, I got involved in the cooperage side of things, that is supplying oak to the whiskey trade. We used to supply it to the beer trade, but of course they went to aluminium barrels after that. But we once had the Guinness account, and my predecessor used to spend a lot of time in Dublin and doesn't remember much about it. And I then took it over and had to spend a great deal of time up in Scotland in the distilleries, and I don't remember much about that either. But what happened was the Scots liked to use, once used American bourbon. The American bourbon trade, the cooperage, what do we call it, when you force people to do things in Parliament, they were forced to pass a law whereby you couldn't call it bourbon if you matured it in a barrel more than once. The barrel could only be used once. As in which case the American cooperage trade were pouring out barrels left, right and centre. So once they were used once, they couldn't be used again for bourbon, so the Scots used to buy them. Scots will use anything, and in fact it works fine anyway. But they like to have, American barrels 40 gallons, they like to 50 gallons, so they used to enlarge, they get 5 shoots, as they call them, that's knockdown barrels, and make 4 hogsheads out of them. So because they're bigger, they need new heads. And that's where we came in with the new heading, American White Oak. And that was terrific fun, a great learning. The most incredible thing that ever happened to me, we were trying desperately to get the Neil Dryborough account in Edinburgh. And there was a major, I can't remember his name, but he was an ex-army major, one of those. And I went in to see him, and he said, "Oh, you're looking to supply us, are you?" So I said, "Well, we're hoping to, sir. I've been at it a while." And he said, "Well, do you know anything about oak?" And I said, "Well, I'm supposed to." He said, "Right." And he got 7 samples of oak on his desk, with the labels down, all different. And I thought, anyway, Guardian Angel came in again. I could tell the difference immediately between red oak and white oak. That wasn't difficult. And I think I'm pretty good at recognizing American white. So that's American red, that's American red. And I went the whole way down the line saying Persian, French, and so on, all the way down. And I got every single one right. Well done. And he said, you got the bill, you got the account. So we kept the account. I mean, it was channeled, it was inspired. I didn't know which was which. There we go. Don't tell her. So then moving on in the company in Liverpool, internet came in the early 90s, and I was deeply involved in that, trying to set up systems for the company. But of course, it was early days, and they were very primitive. And I spent hundreds of great fun, lovely hours with almost zero result. But never mind. Then in 1993, it turned out that my elder brother Johnny, who was the managing director of the company, and I was the other brother in the company. None of our children were interested. His children had gone off to be incredibly successful. One's a surgeon and one's a BAFTA awarded director. And my 2 had gone their own way. So we sold the company to the management and ended up getting about 1/3 of what we'd asked, but never mind, we didn't deserve it anyway. And at that point, I started, again, Guardian Angel tapped me on the shoulder and said, "You're about to get interested in rotary aerodynamics." I said, "What?" Because I didn't know anything about physics or mathematics or anything. But sure enough, I started building and crashing model helicopters. I nearly killed my 2 children with one once, and it lost control. And they were playing underneath. I said, "Run!" And they ran into each other and fell on the ground. And the aircraft, I completely lost control. But somebody else took over. Don't ask me how it happened. The aircraft avoided them all the way around, off to the side, and landed undamaged, completely under its own control. I don't know what. Anyway, I thought I'd better stop doing this. Stop having the children there anyway. And then my mother and my then girlfriend bought me a trial lesson in a real helicopter for Christmas 1993. Instantaneous addiction. Knew I couldn't afford to fly privately. Had to become an instructor. It's actually the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life, but the most rewarding. It wasn't until after I started actually instructing that I realised how rewarding it was and continues to be. The privilege of watching somebody else evolve a skill in the other seat is just fabulous. And you know that you're going to keep them safe and bring them back for lunch. And watching they have good days and bad days and anxiety, and everybody's different in their skills. But when they finally get there and they get their license and you know that they're safe to fly by themselves, it's a wonderful feeling. So it's a real privilege to do that. I then turned, I ended up working for a wonderful company in Red Hill, and the managing director and his wife, when I started my training for an instructor, he said, if you get a helicopter of your own, it'll cost you a lot less to get your instructor rating. So he took us to East Germany, as it was then. And, no, when was this? No, it was no longer East Germany, but it was previously East Germany. And we found this little helicopter, which had been looked after like a baby. Even in the hangar, it had the cover on it, which I thought was a lovely touch. And it had been used just for electricity survey wire. So if an aircraft's used for instruction, you can be sure that it's beaten up because the students are doing things all wrong. So this is in beautiful condition. We brought it back to Red Hill, and they said, well, what registration would you like? So I said, well, what about MURF or something? So it was a Sunday, and we were in the office, and Mark, the managing director, said, go and ask them. The hangar had 29 helicopters in it. And when he said them, there was a group of, what do you call it, people who like to take down numbers, you know, I can't remember what you call them.
Plane spotters.
Thank you, train spotters, plane spotters. In this case, helicopter spotters were down there. He said, go and ask them. I said, okay. So I went down and I said, excuse me, helicopter registration. And they said, yeah. I said, is MURF available? And they said, no, that's on a squirrel in Aberdeen, right? And so on and so on. And finally, I said, what about MUFY? And they said, that's free. On the Monday, we phoned the CAA, and yes, sure enough, so I got my little helicopter registered as G. Muffy. And so G. Muffy saw me right through and brought it back up. Then one time I was looking to come up to Abersock for a week's holiday. So I phoned up Gilly Whip, who owned a farm for area of huge area of fields at the end of Pentline. Can I land my helicopter? Yeah, of course you can. So I phoned her just before I left, and she said, stop, the farmers put heifers in the field, and heifers and helicopters don't mix. So I phoned Gay, who had been widowed recently, and I said, I've known Gay all my life, this is my now wife, and I said, may I plot my chopper on your lawn? And 2 years later, we were married. So that was meant to be. Then, let me get on with my, don't want to leave things out. Just a second. Yep. Cover that. Said too much on that. Yes. Oh yes. Just after I got my helicopter license, not my instructor's rating, but my first pilot's license, I was at my mother's house and came out of the front door, and there's a very strange plant in the flower bed there. And I said, this is a strange looking plant, that, Ma, what's that? She said, my dear, is what you're in danger of becoming at the dinner table. I said, I beg your pardon? She said, it's called a hellebore. I thought that was pretty good. In fact, interestingly, that when I got the gyroplane, my son said, no such thing as a gyroboar, is there, Dad? I said, no, I was in South Africa at the time. He said, look, took me around the corner, and there was a restaurant called the Flying Boar, called BOA, so I took that one on board. Where was I now? Yep, cover that. Started training, well, there came a point where the catchment area for students at Canolfan was rather a lot of blue, you may have noticed along one side. So it's also outrageously expensive. They've got a four-seater at Canolfan now, which is flown by Dan Steptoe, who is the son of the man who owns the whole lease there. Roy Steptoe is an absolutely brilliant businessman. When he was 17, he started washing aircraft at Hackney Green, and he ended up, before he was 30, with 3 Citation jets of his own. And they then were 7 million quid each. And he's got every kind of license you can think of, helicopters, fixed wing, everything. And he always wanted Canolfan Airport. When it came up for sale, finally he got it. And he's been there now nearly 20 years. And when you've got somebody wonderful at the top, it floods down, doesn't it? So all the people there are happy working there, and it's a gorgeous place to be, and a great cafe which he runs and everything. So his son, they've got two sons. There's Dan, who I taught to fly helicopters. And Dan has left me standing. He's an absolutely superb pilot. And he flies the R-44. It's a four-seater. And if you want to learn to fly in the R-44, it's only £700 an hour. Whereas the gyroplane is under 200. So there's a big difference there. Cover that. Students. Oh yes, I'm able to quote David Kenyon, who is the head of Air Sea Rescue for the whole of Wales. He said, you can quote me, the gyroplane is the safest aircraft in the known universe. So if anybody who want to come up with a tootle with me, you know you are going to be flying in the safest aircraft in the universe. There's only one thing, that if you do decide to go for a flight, I insist on coming with you. Right, also I've had the enormous privilege of being a listening volunteer with the Samaritans in Bangor for nearly 20 years now. Excuse me. I'm not actually listening in anymore, because I did that for 16 years, but I look after their IT. But two aspects persuaded me to join the Samaritans right at the outset, and have remained true ever since. And that is, that in order to be a Samaritan, you need to be able to switch off after the session. If you take it home with you and you think about it, it's absolute no-no. So that's a hugely important part. And the other thing is the main aspect of our training, which is absolutely brilliant and works 100%, is to never, ever, ever give advice. Which is very difficult sometimes, because you really want to tell them, but we'll never do. There might be an occasional instance where maybe a young girl needs to be, have you been to hospital? And you say, have you considered going to A&E? And she, oh no, okay. Then that she's thought of it. You just say, have you considered? But we'll never otherwise give any kind of advice at all. And the reward, after an hour and a half on the phone with somebody who was in desperate straits, and they will say, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you've helped me with your advice. We're all able to say, nope, didn't give you any advice at all, because we're absolutely not allowed to. What we did is, between us, we explored your feelings, and you came to the conclusions as to what you were going to have to do next, what's going to be the best. And they go off feeling uplifted, and we feel uplifted. It's a fabulous system. If you're ever inclined to look further into it, it doesn't matter, your age is irrelevant, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter at all. But you've got to know that you would be able to switch off, even after the most distressing calls, when you come out. That's the only qualification you need. Because there's no scripting, everything is done from the heart, everything is done, you're not told what to say at all, ever. Each volunteer does it completely differently, and they all have their own success rates. It's wonderful. So, thoroughly recommended. And it's free of charge, because you're a volunteer. Then I discovered and plunged into the Nefyn Age Well group. And thanks to a really great crowd of fellow members, and our magical choir and drama director, what's her name again? Roberta Morell, BEM, and well deserved. I'm delighted and privileged to be part of it. So now, going off at a completely different tangent, I will now describe what worked for me and continues to work in life in general. I won't try and convince you of any of it. You will make your own minds up. And please just simply take or leave whatever I say here today. What I am clear about is that absolutely none of my business as to how anyone views what I have to say. Your own intuition and discernment will decide whether or not it interests you, and if anyone for any reason at all wishes to hear no more, would rather quietly depart, then I won't be in the slightest bit offended, be sure. I'd very much rather that you feel at ease, whatever you might choose to do or be. Nonetheless, I invite you to be curious. Curiosity is one of the driving forces of life itself. Being curious, like little children who have untrammeled open minds, invites clarity without judgment. Our egos will try and prevent open-mindedness. It's their job, they feel sure, Ego says, I've looked after you all your life and you're still alive, so I must be getting it right. Please consider these possibilities. That our egos are wonderful tools that we've been given, without which we would not be able to make judgments or comparisons. But our egos are tools and they are not who we are. And many people make the mistake of thinking that their egos are who they are and what they are feeling, what they're intending to say and do. They look after us in vital fight, flight or freeze situations. Very important if a saber-toothed tiger happens to pop around the corner. They also cling onto our beliefs. And it is just possible that some of our beliefs are limiting, perhaps even erroneous. But beliefs can be changed. An example was, say, before Pythagoras, Aristotle and Eratosthenes, we believed the earth was flat. Some people still do, but that's up to them. Your conscious mind, which allows the help of your ego, can only think one thought at a time, even if only for a second or two, although I believe that females of the species are hugely more capable than the males in that regard, switching thoughts at an incredible speed, which I'm sure must be very advantageous at times. I'm told that beliefs from our conscious mind colour our subconscious minds. And that while the subconscious mind is capable of storing incredibly vast amounts of information, it takes on board everything the conscious mind throws at it without any judgment of any kind. So whatever you throw at your subconscious mind, which is it takes in your beliefs, it holds as gospel. It doesn't question it at all. So our beliefs from our conscious mind colour our subconscious. And while the subconscious mind is capable of storing incredibly vast amounts, it takes on board everything the conscious mind throws at it. It accepts unconditionally whatever it is offered for storage. And if that includes believing the earth is flat, as far as the subconscious mind is concerned, it's flat. An extreme example could be that of a cult, where the participants have been brainwashed to believe certain things and their subconsciouses accept it all without question. If that belief is subsequently changed, when, say, a cult member realizes they've been duped, the subconscious accepts that reversal instantly without having any viewpoint about it or judgment. We do have control over the wonderful tools that we've been given. And so it's entirely possible to say kindly to your ego, just stand by for a moment. I wish to be curious about something, and with an open mind. I know you were there and that you only wished to protect me, but I'm choosing just now to be curious about some things, and I will choose to do it without fear. So you're not needed until and unless I feel fear. Okay? And the ego says, here we go again. So I was introduced to channeling back in 2004. So let me, if I may explain, I'll read a definition of channeling, which I hope is unbiased, and that I obtained by an AI application called Claude AI. You may have heard of ChatGPT, and Claude is another one of those. And what Claude has to say was this, and I thought, good. The definition of spiritual channeling supplied by Claude.ai. Spiritual channeling is generally understood as the practice of a person, called a channeler, acting as a conduit for communication or information from a source beyond their ordinary conscious self, such as the spirit, deity, higher being, collective consciousness, or one's own higher self. The core idea is that the channeler temporarily sets aside or quiets their ego or their rational mind to allow another consciousness, intelligence, or energy to speak, write, or express itself through them. This can take various forms. Conscious channeling. The person remains aware and simply receives impressions, words, or ideas that feel like they originate from an outside source. Trance channeling. The person enters a deep altered state and may have little or no memory of what was communicated. Automatic writing, you may have heard of. The hand moves or writes to type messages without conscious direction. There is also mediumship. specifically communicating with deceased individuals. This, I have to tell you, is not an area that primarily interests me at all, personally speaking. No more do I have any interest in the occult or anything religious to do with this. From a skeptical perspective, this is Claude AI again, channeling is often explained as a form of the subconscious mind expressing itself, creative intuition, or the ideomotor effect, I had to look that up, involuntary muscle movements, ideomotor, where the mind produces content that feels external but originates actually from within the person. From a spiritual perspective, it's taken literally as genuine contact with non-physical intelligences, guides, or higher dimensions of reality. It shows up across many traditions, from ancient oracles and shamanic practices to modern figures like Jane Roberts, who channeled the Seth books, or Esther Hicks, who channeled Abraham, and many others around the world. So that's artificial intelligence's definition of channeling, which I can't disagree with. So from there on, I just want to go further now. Right, there are three types of channels in my experience. There are charlatans, you always get those, you might even be looking at one now. That I've found that there is always a negative aspect to anything that a charlatan channel tries to put through, always something negative, which tends to guide me away from them. The second type of channeler is a channeler who colours the information coming through with their own personality and beliefs, not necessarily realising they're doing it. But again, it can show up. And then there's the genuine channels, who are fairly few, but they're consistent and always with loving and helpful, beneficial information. Always, without exception. And what started to, when I first heard about this, a load of bunkum, but then I started to listen to information coming through Esther Hicks, who's been doing it for 41 years now, no more than that. And the information coming through was startling. And then I thought, well, and then I found out that other channels around the planet, Cryon, Theo, Yeshua, White Cloud, all coming through different people and in different languages, but with the same information. And that got my attention. At first I thought, what a load of nonsense, but then, hang on, there might be something to this. Especially when, as Abraham said, I've already said, I'm no interest in the occult or Ouija boards or anything like that. No thanks. The first channel started to pay more attention to was Abraham, doing it for 50 years. And Abraham, through her, described how they are a group of usually about 100 souls who promised us many eons ago that, well, we were ready, and now we are apparently, that they would tell us who we are, where we came from, why we are here, and how to make the best of it. I thought that could be quite good information. So I started to listen. And subsequently, for me in time, it led me to becoming to understand and then to believe, and now I speak for myself, of course, to know that we are all eternal spiritual beings having a chosen temporary physical experience here on earth. Now, for some people that's easy to accept and bing. Then again, going back through because with the age of 0 to 7, you take on everything that you're given, from your peers or your teachers, your parents, whatever. And it's meant to be as a challenge, because then after that, if you come to question everything, then you should be able to get it straight. But it's only fair to say that everybody has different experiences of religious instruction or whatever. And I respect completely, if somebody is a complete total believer in Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever, I have no judgment about them at all. It's an experience they've chosen, and I have nothing to criticize about that whatsoever. So I've now come to know that we are eternal spiritual beings having a chosen temporary physical experience here on earth. I purchased a Theo interview. Now, Theo is a group of what they describe themselves as a group of angelic beings who have been coming through a woman called Sheila Gillette. She's still alive, she's in early 80s now, but she's been doing it for over 50 years. And at the time, this was back in 2013, she was still doing one-on-one interviews, channels, whatever you like to call them, and you do it by phone. So I got in touch, and sure enough, yes, for an hour's consultation, I think it was $100 then. I remember asking her secretary, is it okay to, what about inappropriate questions? And the answer is, you can ask whatever you like, inappropriate or otherwise. So I said, well, if I put in deliberate inappropriate questions, go ahead. There'll be no judgment about it. It'll be treated as it's treated. I said, okay. So one of my 39 questions, all of which were answered, by the way, one of my 39 questions was, may I know whether Gay, my wife, or I will transition, that is pop our clogs, first? And the answer to that came instantaneously. The answer to that is not ours to give. Furthermore, you would be better to focus upon your now, which is actually all you ever have. That was good. But I've got the 39 questions, I've still got them listed if anybody's interested, but one of the ones that thrilled me to bits, I said, do animals have souls? And the answer came, yes. All beings have souls. And furthermore, if you wish to know more about that, everything in existence, everything in material existence, has a consciousness of some sort, including rocks, sand, anything you like. Everything has a consciousness of some sort. So that was really interesting. So that got me started. I started to pay more attention. I've covered that. Oh yes, then, excuse me. Again, later on in 2013, I purchased an Akashic Records reading with a woman called Robin Clare in Connecticut. And the Akashic Records are described as the records that are kept in non-physical of every split second of every experience of every being that has ever lived. So it's a complete library of everything that's ever happened to you and everybody else in existence, and also presents it from a viewpoint, not just your own viewpoint, but from the viewpoint of other people who were there and experienced the same thing at the same time. And this is something you go through a review after you pop your clogs. And again, nothing to worry about, because it's a revelation of what it was like to be somebody else, observing you doing what you did. There is no judgment, but there we are. The Akashic Records have only become apparently available to us over the last 80 years, because the human collective consciousness wasn't sufficiently elevated to be ready to accept it. And you can now, through Akashic Records readers, and there's more and more popping up all the time, access the Akashic Records about past lives, etc. But you're only given information that would be a benefit to you in your present life. So that is actually carefully filtered. And so I had an Akashic Records reading with Robin Clare back in 2013, and what happened was, at first she said, oh, I can hear laughter. I said, well, that's not a bad thing, is it? She said, no, it's wonderful. And she said, okay. She said, your elemental guides, we all have many, many guides. The elemental guides are the ones that guide you with regards to nature. The elemental guides want you to write a children's book. Moi? And I thought, actually, I'd love to do that, but I wouldn't be sure what to write about. And she said, yes, you're going to. Do you meditate? I said, well, I try to do sort of 10 minutes in the morning. She said, that's fine. As you meditate, you will be given tranches of the story you're going to write. Yeah? Sure enough, it started to happen 2 days later. And you will put the story, you will be given the imagination, you'll put the story in your own words, because you're good at words. And she stopped. There's a long pause. Yes, she said, you're going to be, yes, you're going to be, it's going to be illustrated. You're going to find an illustrator somehow by connection through the internet. And, okay. So I thought nothing of it until it started coming through. A couple of days later, then what happened was, you can have a look at these later, Rufus and the Flying Carpet, book 1, and Rufus and the Flying Carpet, book 2, is here, available on Amazon, and I'm in the middle of writing book 3, and what happened was, shortly after I was learning to fly gyroplanes in Rougheth York, and I went out to dinner with a lovely boy who was also learning, and I said, have you any interest in anything like spiritual? He said, no. Oh, he said, wait a minute though. He said, a pal of mine is, and he invited me to come to somebody's house recently, about 3 weeks ago. It was amazing. It was a person who called themselves a psychic artist. I said, what the hell is a psychic artist? He said, well, I didn't know either, but he said, I didn't want to go. He said, come along, and if you don't like it, you can leave, no one will be offended. So he came in this big living room in this house, and there was a woman sitting there with 2 easels, and in front of her were 2 sets of families, or 2 or 3 members of each family, who had come to make connection with their father, grandfather, whoever it was, who had passed on. And she was passing messages to and from the families. At the same time, she was drawing portraits with both hands simultaneously on these 2 easels. And when she finished, she turned the portraits round, and the families went, and they produced photographs of the people who passed on. They matched the portraits exactly. So my friend Dave said, that astounded me. And he said he spoke to her companion, it's not a partner, it's just a business companion, who, because she travels the world doing this. And he said, it's just amazing. We'll be driving down a B road, bumpy B road, and she'll suddenly go into a trance, and she'll reach for a pad and start drawing absolute perfect line drawings without the slightest smudge at all, even though the car's bumping all over the place. He said, it's physically impossible, but I've witnessed it 100 times. And I thought, wow. So I said, how can I get in touch with her? He said, well, I've got a phone number. So I phoned her up and explained about the books. And she said, oh yes. She said, anyone in your family who was a good artist? I said, yes, my late sister Ariel was a superb artist. And she loved doing illustrations for children. I'll have a word with her. And I'll get back to you. Now, my sister's name is Ariel, A-R-I-E-L-L-E. It's an unusual name, and I never spelt it before. This woman is Sandra. Sandra is a psychic artist. Never spelled it before. 2 weeks later, I thought she'd forgotten about me, and an email came, said, I've been in touch with Ariel, spelled correctly. She said, and she's delighted to be able to help with the illustrations. She said, although you asked for simple line drawings, you're getting full colour, typical of my bossy sister. And I said, I don't want any anthropomorphization, putting trousers on rabbits and that sort of thing. She said, you'll get a minimal amount, it will be a little bit, because children like that. So for instance, the front of the book is a rabbit running on his hind legs, So children quite like that, although there aren't any trousers, but that's it started, the illustrations used to come to the psychic artist from my late sister Ariel, and she would then pass them on, and there are 14 illustrations in the first book, 14 in the second, and she's already started on the third one. She passes on these illustrations in her imagination telepathically to her student, Ellie Grant, who is at the furthest possible end of the autistic spectrum. Can't speak to anyone, but you can only communicate with her by email. And she does this, and she passes the illustrations on telepathically to Ellie, and Ellie paints the paintings, and they come out. And I've just got to show you an example right at the front of this, because this was one. Hang on a second. Talk amongst yourselves. This is an example. She, when she was away in Australia, Ellie created this painting by herself. And when she got back to Ellie, you shouldn't have done that. Have you noticed? There's the carpet under the chair. The little rabbit couldn't have pulled that out. So I said, nonetheless, it's a fabulous painting. Let's call it Rufus's Dream. So we did. We went on from there. And so this is what happened then. So the other thing that happened in my Akashic Records reading was, she said, is there anything else you want to address the Akash, as it's called for short? Do you have any problems? I said, well, there is one problem, but I've just come to live with it. I am a flying instructor, and I'm absolutely bloody terrified of heights. And I was, but the thrill of flying just superseded my total terror. But I'd be sweating and shaking all the time I was up there. And she said, oh, okay, hang on a second. Wow, she said, I've never been so far back. I said, what do you mean? She said, this is almost Neanderthal times. You're going over mountains with a group of friends, and you're gung-ho and careless, and you get close to a cliff, you trip, and over you go. And you've been on planet Earth over 960 times. God, exhausting. And she said, and most of that, all that time, a younger aspect of yourself has volunteered to look after you by instilling a fear of height into you, so you won't do this kind of stupid thing again. And she said, actually, I'm told that you were a pilot in the First World War. I forgot to ask her which side I was on. And she said, since then, am I right in saying that aircraft are now, because when you were so terrified of heights, you flew very carefully, which was a good thing, otherwise I'd have broken the aircraft up. So but today, modern aircraft are strong and able. I said, yes, and I'd love to. So she said, okay, what do you have to do? I said, I know what I have to do. I've just suddenly got to come to me. I have to say to this younger aspect of myself, thank you for looking after me all these lifetimes. I really don't need your help anymore. And would you like to go back into all that is? And she said, yes. And she said, can you think of anybody who would welcome him back? I said, yes, my late brother Johnny. And we both got exactly the same, because we described the picture to each other on the phone. Exactly the same picture. My brother Johnny coming in and said, come on lad, you're not needed anymore, this way, and leading him off. And I thought, well, I wonder. And 2 days later, I was due to go flying again. And fortunately, my instructor, very open-minded, I told him about this. He said, let's go and find out. So he said, I'll fly. He said, get in the aircraft, close your eyes. I closed my eyes. He said, when you start getting frightened, I said, about 500 feet. He said, okay. She said, we're 600 feet now. Open your eyes. Open my eyes. Look down. Absolutely no fear at all. And it never has returned since. So, thank you. So that was my Akashic Records reading. I'll give you a definition of Akashic Records, again by Claude, AI. The Akashic Records are a concept rooted in theosophy and various spiritual and metaphysical traditions. The word Akasha comes from a Sanskrit term meaning either sky or atmosphere, essentially the primordial substance of energy from which all things are said to emanate. The core idea is that the Akashic Records are a kind of cosmic, non-physical library or database that contains every thought, word, action, emotion and experience that has ever occurred throughout the history of the universe, past, present and even probable future events. Now the future can't be predicted because it hasn't happened yet. People make prophecies, but they may or may not come true because in fact what they are is probabilities. And they will change. What happens in the future changes because of what we do now. So we've got free will. If we change our minds about things, it changes the future. Key aspects of the belief include the idea that every soul has its own personal record within this vast archive, and that certain gifted individuals, psychics, mystics, channelers, or those in deep meditative states can access this information with permission from the guardians of the Akash. Permission is given, but they make it clear that access only to information that is beneficial to the asker's current conscious physical life is granted. It's often described not as a physical place, but as a vibrational frequency or a dimension of consciousness. In Hindu philosophy, a related concept exists in the notion of Akasha as one of the 5 classical elements, and in some Buddhist traditions there are similar ideas about the interconnectedness of all consciousness and events. It's worth noting that the Akashic Records are a spiritual and metaphysical concept rather than a scientifically recognized or empirically verified one, of course. They exist within the domain of esoteric belief, though some draw loose parallels to modern ideas like the collective unconscious proposed by Carl Jung, or even to concepts in quantum physics about information being conserved in the universe. So that was the Akashic Record reading, our experience. That was the inspiration for the Rufus books and the Fear of Heights. For me, it was going on to learn because we are told that we create our own reality from split second to split second. There's a most interesting channel called Bashar, comes through an American called Darryl Anker, and has done for 41 years. And Bashar explains that here in this particular physical universe, we have time and space. In non-physical, they don't exist. But don't try and ask what exists instead, because we couldn't comprehend it. But we're given time and space in this particular physical universe for 2 reasons. Space, for obvious reasons, and time, most importantly, to give us a buffer before what we decide we want manifests instantaneously. We might say, hang on a second, didn't want that after all. So it's a buffer of time, and that we create our own reality. And what we're seeing here is in fact an illusion, but the experience of that illusion is absolutely real and is yours and ours forever, inextricably. So to make this time factor seem to work, it's rather like with a movie, a movie film. The film frames are going past the projector light at about 23 frames a second, which gives the impression of movement. And when asked, Bashar explained that the frame rate on planet Earth is 10 to the 43 frames per second. So it's quite an HD movie we're watching. So we're given that we create our own, without realizing it, we are more powerful than we can possibly even conceive of. So we create our own reality from second to second. And with doing that, recognizing that we do create our own reality every split second, we can accept responsibility for it. That's entirely up to us. So we can explore whatever we created, whatever it is, and learn from it, be it positive or negative, instead of thinking it was something outside of ourselves that caused it. It's never, ever someone else's fault. We actually create everything that happens to us. The channels tell us, among myriad other things, that time and space don't exist. I've covered that. The experience of it all, though, is absolutely real, which is why we came here. Space helps with the illusion that we are in separation from all that is. You appear to be a distance from me. You're a separate person. In fact, you're not. There we are. Time acts as a buffer, and given time to think about it and realize it may not be such a good idea of what we thought we wanted. And by treating challenges as opportunities, not always easy, but by treating challenges as opportunities to be the best that we can be, and by being positive and grateful and appreciative of the joys of life, you can't get it wrong. Abraham tells us that we can't get it wrong because we never get it done. We can always have another go at it if we screw it up. From the non-physical, there is no judgment in non-physical. In non-physical, there is only unconditional love. So the viewpoint of non-physical, of us here in physical, is there's no judgment whatsoever, knowing that we've come here to experience, be quiet, come here to experience, to experience what we've come to experience. So, hang on a second now. Yes, you may be familiar with the American term badass. It's an American term which actually means formidable in strength and skill, not as you'd expect it to mean. So I wrote a book called Badass Consciousness, an easy to follow guide to becoming totally aware. And I feel quite sure that this was channeled, because I was channeled to choose a subject, I was challenged to choose a subject close to my heart or it wouldn't work, and then conceive of a book, write it, a minimum of 5,000 words, mine's 8,000, edit it, format it, proofread it, design a cover, which I failed to do because it was rescued by my daughter. I sent her the text of the cover, and she came back with 11 points, and they were all good points. And one of them was, Dad, you've used the F word. Oh no, I said I put F with asterisk after it. She said, doing that in modern writing is so passé. So we took that out. And she said, and your cover is crap. So she redesigned the cover for me. Then I had to upload it, have it approved, publish it, and sell at least one copy in 7 days. And I did it. I get author copies for £2. So, if anyone wants a copy, yours for £2. Okay? I'll put those for after. Okay, it's here. Getting close. I better hurry up, hadn't I? And please feel free to shut me up at any time if I've gone on too long, because I can always come again. Assuming you ever let me through the doors. I'm finding, from my understandings, that divine energy flows through joy, and that genuine laughter is the complete surrender of the ego mind. We all know how marvellous laughter feels. If you're actually rolling on the floor laughing, it's a fantastic sensation, isn't it? And at that point, your ego has absolutely no say in it, because it can't get a word in. I'd like to tell you briefly now, as many of you do know, about the spinal flow technique. It's a form of what's now generally called healing energy. Dr. Carly Axford, a world-renowned chiropractor, discovering the technique, spent the first 2 years practicing it with astonishing success, and thereafter the last 10 years teaching it. It relies 100% on the understanding that your incredibly wise and brilliant body, given the right circumstances and situations, is capable of healing itself from anything. Its stresses arrive in your life. Your body will deal with them if it can at the time, but if it's a bit busy, the saber-toothed tiger come around the corner, if too much else is going on, the body stores, this has been scientifically proved now, the body stores those stresses as tangible, physical blockages in your spine, to be dealt with by the body when the body is ready to do so. In spinal flow, the client lies face down, fully clothed, on a massage table, heated if required, and the practitioner gently touches the spine, which is the nervous motorway of your body connected to every one of your 50 trillion cells. The practitioner gently touches the client's spine and sometimes also the soles of the feet and the backs of the thighs. The practitioner acts as a catalyst to allow the client's brain to feel safe and relaxed and so able to focus on, perhaps let go, of these unwanted blockages. Student practitioners are joining up in ever-increasing numbers literally every month, and there are now many hundreds all around the world, actually thousands now, reporting astonishing successes, more every day. I heard about spinal flow in July of 2024 and was fascinated. I signed up and attended a week's immersive training in Barcelona in March, and I'm thrilled with all that I've learned from the experience of becoming involved with the spinal flow technique. It's an energy healing technique. There are many of them. And the marvellous results are being reported in increasing numbers of testimonials all around the world. So, much of which I've absorbed and learned about spirituality since 2004 was when I first started exploring spirituality, were confirmed when I was listening recently to a question and answer series during a replay of a Theo webinar through Sheila Gillette, this is the 8-year-old, on the 31st of January this year. I have printed out a précis version of this. You're welcome to a copy, anyone who might be interested. So please take one up if you want before you go. And if we run out, you can then take a photograph of it and print it out yourself. These are things that Theo told us in this webinar. Take it or leave it, as you wish. He tells us that our intuition has, over the last 80 to 100 years, human intuition, has improved by over 1,000%. That means that you can now actually trust your own intuition completely, without fear. For the last thousands of years, we have been taught or indoctrinated to disbelieve our own inner guidance. This improvement, Theo tells us, is why we can now trust our own intuition completely, without any doubt, if so guided by our feelings and emotions. More about feelings and emotions later. Bear in mind, your feelings and your emotions are your ultimate guide to what is happening. I'll get on to that later. Theo told us in order to break the mould of that old way of being is why we chose to be here in this never-before time of the so-called ascension of humanity, and to discover, trust and know who we truly are. Who are we? Theo says that you are a part or a spark of God, all that is, source, call it what you like. An integral aspect of the energy of everything in existence, all of which energy stems. Before I go into that, scientists, even conservative scientists, now accept that everything is actually energy. Matter doesn't exist per se. It's Newtonian physics. We used to understand that an electron orbited the middle one in the middle, bit in the middle. And scientists now accept that doesn't actually happen. The electrons go in and out of existence trillions of times a second. So nothing actually exists per se. It's not matter, it's energy. Everything is energy in different frequencies and vibrations. And, where was I? Then the question was asked, not just of Theo, but all the channels that I've listed to and trust, all get asked the same question. If everything is energy, where does energy come from? They all answer instantaneously. Everything comes from love. Love is the beginning of everything in existence. Incidentally, what do you think is the opposite of love? Many people think it's hate. It's not. It's fear. Fear is the absolute opposite of love. And if you can, not always easy, but if you can let go of fear, everything works out fine. If someone's trying to control you, they tend to use fear to control you, don't they? But if you're not afraid of them, they can't. So if you can let go, Theo tells us if we can eschew, nice word, means avoid, shun or abstain from, fear, then we can truly come to understand who we are and live joyful lives. Another thing that Theo says, first is best. This is interesting. This was taught to me by Father Clark, who taught me imagination and worthiness as well. He says the first answer you think of is almost always the right one, and to trust that. That's a good worth having. If you think, oh yeah, and then you think, maybe not. Almost 90% of the time, the first one is the right one. Stick with it. It's your guidance telling you, pay attention. Right. They say that a feeling of being blocked is the encroachment of the opinion of someone else. If you can't do that, then you should not, in their opinion. They say trust. Theo says, trust your inner knowing, and your confidence will grow accordingly. Someone said, oh yeah, yes, but start to trust your inner self, you more and more believe it, and then you're hooked. But actually you'll find that the feeling evolves as the trust and confidence grows. Feelings as guidance. I said more on this later. Theo tells us that your feelings, your emotions, are your infallible inner guidance system. If what you're thinking about feels good, then your higher self, the greater non-physical part of you, is thinking about that in the same way. Conversely, if you feel not so good about what you're thinking, then your higher self is not thinking about that in the same way that you are. Theo encourages us to trust this infallible guidance system. So whenever you're not sure, how do you feel about it? That tells you whether you're thinking right or not. Ask and it is given. Theo tells us that our guides are yearning to help, but they never, ever interfere, and only offer their guidance when asked. And they are yearning to be asked 24/7. How best to receive that guidance? One of the most effective ways is meditation. Not the easiest thing in the world. Many people, including me, find it difficult to meditate, but what I do find is I can meditate for just 2 or 3 minutes a day, and that really works for me. First thing in the morning, when you first wake up, you remember every morning, first thing, don't do anything else, meditate. And you go into a completely peaceful state, and as thoughts arise, they always do, they always come, let them float off on a raft down the river. Another thought comes, yeah, okay, I'll deal with you later. And so eventually you'll spend about 2 or 3 minutes not actually thinking of anything. Guidance comes in. All kinds of amazing things happen. Everybody's different. They get guidance in different ways. A feeling, a thought, or it might be a road sign, or something somebody says, or something they read in a book. But the guidance will come in one form or another if you ask for it. If you don't ask for it, they don't interfere at all. The advice is that when your mind is quietened, listen. Answers and guidance come in different ways for everyone, as we're all absolutely unique. Ask yourself the question, this is a good one, I've tried this. If I did know the answer, what would it be? And then listen, write down, clarity will evolve. What if I'm wrong? Theo says, look at the little children learning to walk. They fall and get up and keep trying without judgment. They trust the process. Theo tells us that everyone channels, mostly without realizing it, each one uniquely. And this facility is helped enormously by breathing deeply, good nutrition, of course, and good hydration. Theo tells us that frequencies have increased exponentially over the last 100 years. The fifth dimensional energy was fully in place by 2012. Our bodies have been acclimatizing, some quicker than others, ever since. The first dimension is a point, the second is width and length, and the third, where we are, is three-dimensional. Fifth is non-physical, but with access to these lower frequencies. Don't ask me to expound upon that anymore, I'm not able to.
Pauli, how long do you propose to talk for? I'm finding it difficult to concentrate on all this. I'm thinking you ought to be drawing it to a close unless I'm outvoted.
Fair enough. I've got out of 6 pages, I've got 2.5 left.
Strikes me a bit long.
I can come back another time, if you want me to. Okay, it is a lot, isn't it? I'm saying, I don't want to be saying too much, but effectively, I'd like to end by saying thank you very much for coming. Nobody's walked out. So there's some itchy feet, but certainly I can understand if you're saying, what a load of garbage. That's what I felt like first when I first started to explore spirituality back in 2004. And the last thing I want to do is proselytise, but what I do exhort you to do is to be curious and to do your own research. And if it interests you at all, I've got these things that you can take away with you. And in fact, yes, look, it's 6 minutes past 12, we've been gone for over an hour. Feels like 2 minutes to me. But thank you all very much indeed for coming. Bless you.